The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the hosts and guests as individuals and do not necessarily reflect those of advertisers or sponsors. This show is intended as entertainment and commentary only, you maroons. The producers strive for verisimilitude, sorta at times, but nothing said on this podcast should be taken as fact by the listener or viewer without performing due diligence. While generally considered safe for work by way of content, some language may be considered offensive by those special snowflakes out there who can't handle grown-ass adult robot talk. Go watch Elmo then, you pussy.
Existence, the physical universe, is basically playful. There is no necessity for it whatsoever. It isn't going anywhere. That is to say, it doesn't have some destination that it ought to arrive at.
This is Keep Your Hat On, a show by three nerdy nobodies and one nerdy kind of a somebody about a whole lot of nothing in particular. Keep Your Hat On is brought to you by the Narrowband Broadcast Network, NBBN. The focus is on you. By Andrew Scott Media, making your media matter, and by the kind support of our viewers and listeners via Patreon. Patreon. Create on your own terms. On this episode, it's all artificial intelligence all the time, and being that we're always so trendy and topical, with our fingers on the pulse of the beat on the street, we might as well keep going with what the kids are talking about these days. Anyway, Mr. Broomedge will finally be back next episode, so I'm your disembodied announcer, Drew the Paranoid Android. And when I finally get my articulated bionic limbs on you, I'm gonna make you squeal like a 150 baud modem. Here are your hosts, Andrew, Robert, Dr. Mark, and putting the fish in artificial.
Let's go 3,
It's Chris.
2, and hello, and okay.
You want to do that again?
Yeah, maybe.
Leave it in its color.
Is that what it's called?
It's a shade that we really want.
That's right. That brown kind of effluent looking thing. 3, 2, 1, and hello, and welcome back to Keep Your Hat On, the show where hell even we don't know where we're going to go. We are proving it today in style with Ty Robert Anthony and Christopher Vicano and Dr. Mark Peterson. I'm Andrew Scott, but nobody cares. And we kind of accidentally took a month off because Chris and Ty and I got together, and that's not my hair. Okay, Chris and I and Ty got together and really didn't have much to say. Oh yeah, it is a very special Keep Your Hat On.
We're off to a roaring start.
But you know, the thing is, and this is really just kind of what it is, we got to talk about AI again, because apparently it's all any of us can talk about or read in the news.
Nobody can get enough. Nobody can get enough.
Right? I've had enough. I've had enough of this. I've been talking about this on my other properties for voiceover.
I'm reaching saturation.
Yeah, I am getting towards super saturation.
And that's just from you.
That's all anybody has been wanting to talk to me about in the voiceover world, and we'll cover a little bit more on that in a minute. But you know, we've got. John, boy, I don't know where this hair is coming from. I don't even have any.
There's a bumper sticker right there. Put that in the
I don't know
merch.
where this hair is coming from.
Yeah, that's where this hair is coming
This
from.
isn't my hair.
Give me a couple days. We will have a new shirt up on the merch shop that says, this isn't my hair. You know, the thing for me, I guess, and this is really something that I've been trying to reinforce to people, and I'll start the conversation off this way. You know, we have this idea, particularly with technological growth, that, you know, we've got two real growth models that most people out in the waking world are familiar with. We've got a logarithmic growth, which is things shoot up and then they level off. And then we have, thanks to COVID, everybody's very familiar with exponential growth, which is thwomp. But interestingly, if you combine both of those, and Dr. Mark being so saturated with statistics, he will probably be able to back me here, that kind of the happy medium, if you combine a logarithmic growth with an exponential growth, what you wind up with is something that's referred to as a sigmoid curve.
Oh, there you go,
which is
Andrew.
just whoop in the net. I'm a follower of a guy on YouTube called Tom Scott. Tom Scott is the 30-something millennial-ish kind of YouTuber with a red shirt, and he just runs around the planet talking to interesting people about interesting things. But he's also very good at being a science explainer, or an explainer of things that on first class, a lot of people would think to be very complex topics. And one of the things I had been struggling with my VO people and my followers on some of my other properties, trying to explain to them, because everybody in the VO world's going, oh, synthesized voices aren't that good yet. You can always tell. And what I was trying to get through to them is, yeah, right now in the here and now, we can. But have you heard of Moore's Law?
Yeah.
Have you heard about the fact that, generally speaking, technology advances? It doubles in its ability every 2 years. Now, of course, Moore's Law first came to us from Gordon Moore, who was talking about the size of printed circuits back when those were really the barrier to technological growth. Now, even Google has come out and said, yeah, Moore's Law for circuits really doesn't apply to software development. We're seeing a doubling in computational power every 6 to 8 months when it comes to developing new software processes. And 6 to 8 months ain't 2 years. So to all those people out there that keep trying to kick sand in my face about, oh, well, you can still tell. I'm like, yeah, today. Do you realize now you can, synthesized voices put breath in there. You can hear them exhale. You can hear an algorithm exhale.
Yeah. It's interesting, by the way, they call this, I was thinking about like the deep fakes that I've been seeing here and there online, right?
Right.
And really that's sort of, I think that would be the way to talk about AI, moving in on voiceover work, right, where it can actually reproduce some of the breathing, and maybe you can read in the pauses and all the rest of that jazz. But now they're calling it AI, right, instead of just deep fake. But
right.
I like the fact that they call it deep fake. I keep chasing this back to, so you talk about how long you've been talking about AI.
Yeah, right.
I've been on this since the early 90s. And, the question about artificial intelligence and one of my hobbies back in the ancient computer days, when I got my first K-Pro 4 running CPM, by the way, was I was doing all those mathematical diversions out of Scientific American and random generation of text.
Right.
Strangely enough, one of the first real applications of computer analysis of text, which requires you to make those kinds of same textual probability distributions.
Yeah.
So, right. So you can sample a guy's text, right? And there's all sorts of data you can get out about which words follow what and all the rest of that.
And the repeatability and all that stuff on a scatter graph. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you just seed the random text generator with that stuff, but you give it that probability distribution, and then it produces text that looks a lot like that. It was really interesting because back in those days on the old sci philosophy Usenet groups, David Chalmers, the now famous David Chalmers, who's Mr. Consciousness, I still think you're wrong about all of this shit, Dave. So do I. God. Anyway, but he's famous and he's well published and he makes a lot of money and he's thoughtful. That's true. But we were talking about that since then. And the real question was when is it going to be intelligent and not just artificially intelligent? And this keeps bringing me back to the Turing test.
Right.
Right. So that's what you just said triggered this thought about Turing, which is it intelligent or not? And Turing's simple criterion was, if you can't tell it apart from a regular human, then it's now intelligent.
Right.
And, the real horror of that is that there are people we know who don't pass the Turing test.
I was just going to say.
Right.
That seem to be artificially intelligent.
And the other thing regarding that is, we still don't really have, and I mean, Mark, be free to correct me as you always have been.
Okay.
We still really don't have a great definition of intelligence.
Oh, no.
And we're saying, well, is it intelligent? The real question to ask at that point is, yeah, but what does that mean?
You triggered another wonderful thought.
I'm sorry to be so triggering to you.
You're triggering today, buddy. So my favorite one. This is one of my favorite lines. I stumbled on. It's in Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, and this may be the first slight about artificial intelligence. He said that he says you really need to think about this stuff to really get it. And then, but then there's this pause, and he goes, "But look, even a drunk can recite the prose of Empedocles."
Right.
And it's like we know a lot of people like that over on Fox News, and who can buy, you just learn all the jargon and you can trot that shit out, and you sound like you're smart. And right now, there's a sense in which that's what the computer programs seem to be doing, right? Like this Chat GPT is.
Yeah.
And so, everybody's all freaked out. But let's just go back to what you said, which is that, why haven't we come up with a definition of intelligence? And I have a working hypothesis for why that is. And that's that people are really afraid to. Because what's happening, what I see anyway, is that, let's take this back to brass tacks. People are really afraid of equating the mind with the brain.
Right.
They don't want to do that. And it's like, I kind of don't either.
I'm hesitant to do that.
But consciousness, the question I ask them when we get into this is I'll say, well, so is consciousness an evolutionary adaptation or not?
Right.
And they'll all go, yeah. I said, oh, well, that means that your mind is an evolutionary adaptation. It's really just your brain. And it's like, even, by the way, Rorty did this in his wonderful books at the end, and he drove people crazy with this stuff. He said, how, I love the idea of having an immortal soul, but we had no proof for one. So what if we just bracket that and put that off in belief, right? And you can have that, but you can't use it you can't use that excuse in daily life. And I think that's what's really going on here is that people don't want to talk about artificial intelligence for exactly what you said, is like they're afraid of talking about intelligence, right? What's the measure? It's been abused in horrifying ways, of course, right, for the last couple hundred years.
Yeah, at least.
So many thoughts here, if I could jump in.
I just want to put a flag in the ground, though, that I do want to get back to talking about what Tom Scott was saying, because that's really the crux
that's where
of
I was rolling.
But,
sure, we'll circle back. With regard to the question of intelligence, it strikes me that once you draw that line in the sand, you can't undraw it.
No, exactly right.
And that is a really, that's a really daunting proposition, I think. And I hesitate to connect the mind to the brain and because maybe there is a physical component, but I would think it transcends beyond the brain into the nervous system and other parts of the body.
There you go.
I mean, they doing well for you? Go ahead. There is evidence that memory is stored in different parts of your body, for example.
There is.
There is some weird truth to this, right? Yeah, go on.
And our whole GI system has its own memory.
I know mine does.
Right? So on that piece, I'm hesitant. Moving along, I want to circle back to your observation about deepfakes, because this is very much where my mind has been lately. And
for you guys,
or your brain.
I've heard a number of.
Sorry, that was just you just teed that up, and I just limped along and kicked it down the road.
Get in my tummy.
Yeah, right.
Anyways, Chris, sorry.
I think connecting it to deepfakes is actually really a good way to look at it. From another angle, from another perspective that I've been coming at it from, which is, okay, what does it mean in the real world? What are the manifestations? And we think about like, okay, the deepfake videos that had people, that was kind of freaking a lot of people out, 10 years ago, because you were seeing deepfakes of people saying things on video that they never
Chris,
actually said.
It was all porn. It was all porn.
That's where I'm headed, though.
Well, of course you are.
Hey,
Sorry.
With those deepfake videos, there was a lot of dust up and furor and concern, but it sort of became just this kind of passing thing that, never really manifested into anything like fundamentally dangerous. It was more kind of a toy that we don't really know.
Weren't we talking about the K-pop group that staged a 13th member or something like that?
Yeah,
we did.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, I mean, there is some exploratory there, but I mean, a lot of the concern at the time was this idea of videographic truth, right? Mm-hmm. And that if people can manufacture video, we no longer know what's true. Okay, and I'm going to circle back to that point in a minute.
Make it be a second, not a minute.
I'll be as fast as I can. So you mentioned porn. So we dial back farther, and Photoshop. I mean, if you think about the emergence of Photoshop, in the early days of the internet, people were passing around, photos of Jennifer Aniston's head photoshopped onto a nude body, and it was kind of an amusing thing, and it was whatever, but it never really became anything because people could tell. And even really sophisticated Photoshop users, you could still kind of spot it. But that disrupted the whole idea of photographic truth, which took a big hit. So I guess the point I'm building towards is we're at this place where we're changing the terms of our ability to record and capture information and feed it back to ourselves in such a way that we no longer even give a shit what's true.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. My issue with that will be resolved with the first court case that has to bring in special forensics to decide whether or not the security camera video is real or the body camera video has been tampered. My big thing with this, and this does come back to the Tom Scott piece that I'll link to up here because you guys go see it. I actually reached out to Tom Scott to see if I could include some of what he put out there in my video. And due to certain contractual obligations that he has, he said I couldn't do it. Kind of gave me a nudge, wink, wink going, but I'm not stopping you. But I was just like, no, I respect you too much in your content creation to do that. But really what Tom was saying, this idea of logarithmic versus exponential growth, he came up with a great analogy for where we are right now with this. Y'all remember Napster? Okay. We, in Tom Scott's mind,
that was a sad day.
We are at the Napster moment of changing the way technology grows by way of artificial intelligence, chat GTP, and things like synthesized voices. We are way down on the bottom of that sigmoid curve.
Yeah, we're not even started yet.
No, barely scratching the surface because this stuff has been in development for decades. But now us in the public are starting to see it. And the change of the change and growth and ability for this stuff to fake reality is going to skyrocket in the next, I'm not even saying years, I'm saying 2023 is going to be buckle the up because it is just going to blow and we are not going to top out for a long ass while. Ty, what were you going to say?
Well, what was I going to say? I forgot now.
Okay, well, we'll come back to you, and we will come back after this break and continue on this scintillating discussion here on the Narrowband Broadcast Network. I'm Andrew, that's Dr. Mark, that's Ty, that's Chris. I'm pointing at my screen. You guys can't see it, but they're right there, and we'll be right back. About it. 3, 2, and hello, and we're back on the Narrowband Broadcast Network. This is Keep Your Hat On. One person without a hat is Chris. One person without a hat is Dr. Mark. And one person, a brother of mine, without any hair and a freshly shorn and shined head is Ty Robert Anthony. And Ty, you were mentioning earlier before we got on call about the most recent John Oliver Last Week Tonight episode that I think is just a week old. I'm pretty sure that
it's just a week old. The new season just started. 2 episodes into it, his second episode, he's tackling this subject.
Yeah, and again, I'll point to it up here. He did a great piece on it in his last season, but that also references just how fast the changes are happening, because he's revisiting this less than six months after he did. So what was he coming at in this latest one?
Well, he doesn't get too specific about that.
Right.
What he does talk is he talks a little bit about the responsibility of these folks that are behind these things, right?
Yeah.
And these guys are it's Silicon Valley. If you guys don't know, their slogan is, move fast and break things.
Yep.
Which has got us where we got to Facebook and Instagram and body images and body shaming and all these other things, right? And in some an argument could be made in that an algorithm is responsible for, in large part, for the division that's in our country right now.
Yeah, with the use of planted trolls and posts being made by bots and
And another thing that he's really was interesting was this black box theory.
Yeah.
In that maybe not even the corporations that are releasing this out there in the wild know exactly what it's doing and how it's learning, and better yet, how to rein it in or how to call it, right?
Yeah.
One of the examples that he points to is the famous Microsoft personality, AI personality that was like a few years back.
Oh, you mean Bixby? No.
Cortana? This was no. This
Bob?
was just a standalone. This was a standalone AI experiment, and I think within like 30 to 45 minutes, it was full of racism and hate.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they just had to take it down. They had to take it off because
it immediately started marching down the street in a brown shirt.
Hand in the air.
Not even 24 hours. They had it didn't take long. And so, who knows? These things are, they're not learning just by what you type in.
No.
And what the next person's typing in, but they're learning from the example that they publish, right? So they publish an example for you. They take that and they learn from that, become a little bit better. Take this example that they just gave to this other person. He also goes into into Mark's territory, of course.
Yeah,
and writing and all that other stuff, and he does it.
Oh yeah,
and
with this amazing sense of humor that.
And for our, look, none of us have to try to upsell John Oliver. He's a national hero for us. The thing that I want to make clear to our viewers and listeners is this idea that Ty just brought up of a black box. We tend to, when we think of a black box, we either go to Schrodinger's cat or the thing that records all the last minute details of a plane crashing into the ocean. Black box development, when it comes to computer science and artificial intelligence, essentially means that they have a dedicated server, which could or could not be a physical item unto itself. But the black box portion of it is that you program this system with a base set of instructions and guidelines, and then you walk away and let it do its thing. Black box development really is a code word for iterative development that's unassisted and uninterfered with.
Yeah,
unfettered by the programmers. So, and I just did a couple weeks ago.
Otherwise known as we have no idea what it's doing.
Well, yeah,
now.
but here's
evolutionary programming.
It is. It's evolutionary programming. But I'm going to touch on that in a second, Ty, because that's what comes across to us as the scary thing. But what I'm trying to get in here is that when it comes to black box development, and I just talked to Professor JOANNA BRYSON, who is the professor of computer science and ethics and artificial intelligence at the Hertie School in Berlin, Germany. And Dr. BRYSON has actually advised the EU on their artificial intelligence policies, and they're kind of that level. But in talking with them, one of the things that we discussed was really what a black box is that is kind of scary to us is you feed it an algorithm. And not only does it develop that algorithm, but it can then generate its own associate algorithms and teach them. And they tell two friends, and they tell two friends. And us meatbags start getting scared because we think that what it's doing is growing in intelligence. Technically, it's not. What it's doing, is learning. It is learning, but it's learning by really an overglorified process of, error. What part of this was judged by humans to be wrong versus what part of this was decided upon by humans to be valid. And the other thing and we're now learning this, and we really got a lot of it when we did that syllabus on Aristotle and pirates, which I still think is hilarious and valid. But, one of the things we're starting to learn, though, is that computer algorithms have a hard time differentiating what is demonstrable and measurably correct versus what's true versus what's honest.
Yeah. Chris was talking about the truth of imagery earlier.
Right.
And it's like, I think I'd challenge you to tell me what that means.
Exactly.
Because it's like, what is the truth part? I mean, is it like,
and this was something we discussed at great length in art school. When I was a painting and photography student. This is back in the 90s, where predating all of this discussion. And there was this idea, a lot of us were tracking to go become photojournalists or, things of that nature, or this idea that using a camera to capture reality and documenting, that was the big word,
right?
That we all used. Yeah. Bearing witness, documenting life. And so the idea of photographic truth was very much under question at that time. But the fundamental principle is it records without any, the camera itself records without any manipulation, any judgment, any ideology. It's the person behind the camera. And at that time I was in art school, where photographic truth really came into question is how are you framing your shots? In other words, you're showing the truth of that frame. You're choosing to edit out everything outside of that frame.
Well, and
that
even
contributes
inside
to the
that
larger
frame,
truth of the situation.
even inside the frame, Chris, by using the right depth of field, you can emphasize one thing and de-emphasize something or everything else. Mm-hmm. And you're at that point you are affecting the viewer's interpretation of what the truth is,
of what they're seeing,
and that's not concerning. The big thing for me that's been happening. And in one of my other recent podcasts, actually that same podcast that I was talking about that I featured that interview with Dr. BRYSON, is in the last month, somebody has deep faked my voice without my consent.
Wow.
That's right.
One of my compatriots, Mike DELGAUDIO on YouTube, known as the Booth Junkie, somebody deep faked his voice without his permission. And not only that, in Mike's Discord server that I am an administrator of, this guy decided that I'm going to put it up there because, I was just seeing if I could do it or not. Well, that's been asked and answered. Now, my partner Heather, when I first did it myself on my own voice as research, she said, it doesn't sound like you, but it kind of sounds like what I think your brother would sound like. Which, you know what? As a voice professional, that's scary enough.
Yeah, that's only one degree of separation.
Right?
Not even 1 degree. That's half a degree.
Yeah.
That's really where this, one of the great things about this episode is he takes you on this place where, look at where AI is right
now
in your life right now.
Yeah.
Right. It is all over the place. You don't so insidious that you may not even see where it is.
It's transparent, but it's everywhere. It's driving a lot.
And
of
the
things.
other thing that he really pointed to that I liked was, hey, look at the past examples, right? That algorithm from Facebook, that algorithm from Instagram, the Google algorithm. Look at all these other examples and give it some serious thought, and you'll see that it's probably going to go awry somewhere.
Well,
right?
what I had said a couple times is that
coming back to that ethical thing, right?
Well, and that's where I'm going. And Mark, you'll be able to speak to this too, being that one of your major concentrations in your academic life is the history of technology.
Yeah, yeah.
That, as far as I know, there's never really been a time where we have created technology and somebody, not necessarily the originator of the technology, but somebody has not taken that technology as far as it can practically go.
Absolutely.
As I've been saying, as monkeys, we have a really bad track record of getting genies back into bottles.
If the toothpaste doesn't go back in the tube, that's just it.
Not neatly.
I'd go further. I'd say that this is actually one of the horrors about being human is that our very success is built on exactly the things that are hurting us the most.
Yeah, exactly right. We are the absolute best at making our situation worse.
You want to hear something funny?
Yeah,
I was
very much.
Right?
After all this talk, actually, I don't know how humorous this is going to be. I kind of got to
We'll be the judge of that.
Find out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're not doing that ASMR thing again. I actually heard from one of our listeners who was listening to one of our podcasts when one of us did that and went, don't do that again.
It's probably my fault. Go on.
Yeah,
but,
anyways,
I was on the phone with an internet provider who shall remain nameless.
But if you look up in Portland, it's only going to be one of two companies.
We have that here too.
Yeah,
and they have notable, not so great, less than great customer service.
Mildly horrible.
But they had this great big phone tree, right? Oh, I would love, and this phone assistant. Oh, I would love to help you out. Can you tell me about? First of all, I just wanted to speak to a live voice. I don't want to speak to you, and you keep prompting me. And the second thing that
they all do
is my paranoia started kicking in with all, watching Andy go through and do all this series of things on YouTube was like, what if they're capturing my voice?
Yeah.
They are an internet company, right?
Well,
I'm
and the
sure
other thing
that this
is-
phone system is on the internet.
I'll do this in my best VO voice. This call may be recorded for training purposes.
Yeah.
That's all you need to hear.
But
They're
they didn't tell you
capturing
what
your
they were
voice.
training. Did
What
they?
they were training. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that really does tie for me. The thing that you brought up about the recent John Oliver episode is for me the piece that is missing from this. And that is, where is the level of responsibility to be laid when it comes to these kinds of
And
things?
this whole thing, we shouldn't expect any great things. I mean, our governments are, well, the EU is better than the United States government.
Oh, absolutely. And like
Most
I
of the
say-
people in Congress have no idea how the internet really works.
No.
Let alone how to legislate it.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. And who
and
are they
neither-
going to legislate in favor of? Are they going to legislate in the favor of these huge development corporations? Or are
Big
they
money,
going
baby.
right? So and I want to validate for people listening and watching that this is actually really fucking confusing. It's kind of scary, and for me, part of me is just like, stay calm, don't worry about it. Yes, okay, fine. Somebody cloned your voice. It's okay. You're not that big a talent. It's not going to make you lose any money. One of the more recent pieces that I saw was, and again, with all these people barking at me, oh, it's not that good, it's not that good. People's voices aren't just being cloned. People's voices are now literally being stolen. There is, and I'll put the link up here, there's an Irish voice talent who, a VO compatriot of mine, Paul Schmidt, who I interviewed on one of my earlier shows, talked to them. I'm hoping to get a chance to talk to them as well, because they got a message from a friend of theirs who was a little upset and said, so you sold your voice to an AI platform? And this talent goes,
Wow.
no, I didn't. And he goes, well, it's totally your voice. And it sent a link. This talent, she went to this site, and it was her voice. It was absolutely no question her voice. And here's the thing. It's not that the company that developed, the platform that developed this, they didn't steal her voice directly. What is happening in the voiceover realm now is we have this thing in voiceover called FBO, full buyout, which means if you're a low or starting out talent, you often will provide a service in kind of a piece method. You do this piece, you're done, and then you sell it to the person who's asking for work to be done with full buyout, which means no rights, no royalties, no residuals, in perpetuity, forever, amen.
Work for hire.
What's happening, and this is really driven by the gig economy, what's happening now is that if you sell your voice in a full buyout capacity, you are now telling, you are exactly right. And that means, and this is exactly what happened to this person, they did a contract a while ago to a company that then sold her raw voice takes to this platform and actually did shifty business things in order to try to hide it. This woman is an obviously Irish, raveny black hair. The picture of the person that's supposedly providing this neutral Irish voice is a gray-haired, admittedly very attractive and comely, salt and peppered Asian woman. So
wow.
if that's not smoke and mirrors, I don't know what is.
Is there a little mermaid connection here about having your voice stolen? Is there something going on?
Well, and the thing is, everything is being made extant now, and so
I'm just thinking this is like the ultimate in gaslighting.
Right.
The real question though is like you sort of wandered. We've linked up these two different topics, right? Is like there's a degree to which there's no intelligence involved in just stealing these things, right? The question
an interesting
is like,
way of saying it.
What I mean, the deep fake here is like it's just a clever way to copy. And the question is, if you're using, AI to do it, well, that just means I think that just means you're using advanced tech to make it indistinguishable from the real deals, right?
Yeah.
Bingo.
The thing for me is the generative aspect of this. That's its own quagmire, but it used to take, and Mark, you and I were talking offline a couple weeks ago about really who winds up owning these things by way of copyright. If you tell ChatGPT to puke something out, and then you go and let's say record and don't think that I'm not thinking about trying to be one of the very first all automatically generated artificially intelligent audiobooks from script to voice.
Yeah.
But who owns a copyright on that? Because nobody created it. Or wait, do you actually own the copyright because you gave it the prompts and seeding it?
So let's take a terrifying example that I've just committed here, which is that I'm giving a talk on, we were talking about this before we started recording. I'm giving a talk on Thursday at lunch. We have these little scholar sip lunches, the library puts on with pizza and snacks and stuff like that. We get, and the community's invited and students, but I'm talking about Marxist alienation. So on a whim, let's go back to the pirates and Aristotle. Yar. I thought, So I asked ChatGPT to put together my PowerPoint for this. It said,
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It said, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that.
Right, exactly. No poppy doors for you.
Yeah, that's right.
Did you see the latest one where if it was Alexa instead of Hal? Have you seen the meme yet?
No, I have not, but I imagine it probably suggested groceries, and I can get that for you.
Yeah, you'll see it eventually. But I asked it said, well, I can't put together the PowerPoint for you, but I can tell you what ought to go on the slides. So it just came up with a list of 9 or 10 slides, and that's actually pretty good, right? And I got to thinking about, one of the things this made me think about is, and this sort of gets at Chris's observation about, intelligence and artificial intelligence, and our unwillingness to talk about what intelligence means. It makes me wonder. I think I've always been on the right side of this, but it makes me wonder what's the purpose of education, because this comes back to my wheelhouse, right? Because if they can just they already have Quillbot. I don't know if you guys have seen that lovely thing.
Yeah,
we caught 2 students last year using it because Quillbot forgot to. There was just like these 2 words together that had no more business than the man in the moon being in a freshman's paper.
Right.
Post-Cold War Poland and the changing provision of security. Check plus, Butters.
It was something like passive voyeurism. It was like,
that's what you'd said. We talked about this earlier. Is passive voyeurism.
It was like,
you don't know what that means.
Wait a minute.
Okay,
so we caught Quillbot a couple of years ago. Okay. So here's the question: is like, am I teaching? So what am I being? What's threatening me in the academic universe? This would be true in art too, I think. By the way, and in the artistic dimensions of your all's work. What's the threat? And so in what way am I threatened if they can go to Chatbot and say, put together 3 paragraphs? I'm looking for this, by the way, on Stephen Prothero's History of World Religions little book on Christianity, say, right?
How do you do it? Chat GPT, dude. Chat GPT? Yeah, dude.
In Religion Matters, an introduction to the world's religions, Stephen Prothero argues that Christianity has been shaped by cultural, historical, and political factors over time. He notes that Christianity is not a monolithic religion, but rather a diverse set of beliefs and practices that have evolved in different contexts. Prothero emphasizes the importance of understanding the different branches of Christianity, including Catholicism, Protestantism, and Orthodoxy, in order to appreciate the complexity of the religion. Prothero also explores the tensions between orthodoxy and heterodoxy within Christianity. He discusses how different Christian groups have defined themselves in opposition to others, such as Protestants breaking away from Catholicism during the Reformation. Prothero also notes the role of Christianity in colonialism and its impact on indigenous cultures. He argues that understanding these historical and cultural influences is essential to fully comprehend the nature of Christianity. Overall, Prothero's views on Christianity emphasize the importance of recognizing the diverse and complex nature of the religion. He argues that Christianity cannot be understood solely through its theological doctrines, but also through its cultural and historical context. By taking a nuanced approach to the study of Christianity, Prothero encourages readers to develop a deeper appreciation for the religion and its place in the world.
The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information. We are all, by any practical definition of the words, foolproof and incapable of error.
Right.
And I ran a couple because I had a couple of students hand in papers that were like,
A Feminist Neoliberal Perspective of Post-War Afghanistan by Eric Cartman.
Ah, yes, thank you.
suspiciously,
Suspiciously salient.
So
yeah.
I ran a couple of simulations. It failed the detectors they have out now. They failed those. But the question is, like, I'm not just teaching them the content. In fact, the content of my courses, this is the nice thing about philosophy. The content is almost irrelevant.
Right.
And people go, it's a philosophical topic. It's like, every topic is philosophical, you idiot. But the question is, I'm teaching them the skill set. And so so the question here, and so stay with me. One of the things I'm wondering about is what the right analogy is. So, I'm teaching them how to write and how to think and absorb difficult ideas and then re-express them in their own language. And that's the nature of critical thinking, right? That's the whole of it, right? Especially if you're just starting. Yeah. This is like running laps when you want to get better at running. In y'all's case, so Chris, so for instance, I'm a terrible drawer. I can't draw at all with a pencil and paper and stuff. I can muck stuff up, however, using electronic brushes, right? And electronic stuff.
You do beautiful work digitally.
Thank you. Well, I was asking Alexandra here too, whose specialty is film production technology, right? And for years she taught the film class here, the 16 millimeter class. And I was asking her this morning about this too. It's like, is it any different doing digital now? You don't have to worry about film processing. You don't, editing film. That's what she learned how to do. That's murder.
Yeah.
And I said, is it any better in digital? She goes, if you think about it, it's not, because the skill sets you still need are in here and not just in the tech. So you're staying with me here? So is this the right analogy?
Can I pick up?
Yeah.
This is. I mean, you have just. You've opened it wide up for me to come in with, I warned you, Andy, that I was going to come storming in a little bit contrarian, and this really opens up the conversation for me, because there have been a couple of points we've touched on through here, and I'm going to circle back to you, Mark, in just a moment. But there are a couple little touchstones I need to pop along to get here. One, we were talking about artificial intelligence teaching itself and becoming more intelligent. It's not becoming more intelligent. I would challenge that notion. It's becoming more efficient.
More efficient and more accurate.
And we often equate we mistake efficiency for intelligence in this conversation.
And the trains run on time.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it's important. That's a really crucial distinction to me.
I would agree.
And then Ty, you raised the point about algorithms, things running through algorithms, Facebook going awry. These things having consequences. Yes, they absolutely do. However, Facebook itself did not go awry. Facebook sat there as a platform and processed information. It was the people at Cambridge Analytica that came in. It was human intervention. Yeah. And this gets to my solid core point that I think is really starting to crystallize for me, that what we're talking about is a tool. Humans build tools. And I go to the very simple analogy of a machete. A machete is a very handy tool for clearing brush and cutting a path through the jungle. A machete is also a very effective tool for removing somebody's head. And it is the human holding the machete that decides what that machete, what the purpose of that machete is, what the function of that machete is.
Yeah.
And so it always comes back to how we use it.
That doesn't necessarily work with the black box theory, though, does it?
Well, that's where we're headed. We're still going to find out, I think.
We can, right? I think we might be headed to find that out.
And I think a lot of what Chris is saying is there's a lack of. Oh, help me out, Andy.
We don't know who's actually got their foot hovering over the brake.
There's always a human there.
There's a lack of sentient being resemblance.
Well, are you
so
asking
far.
whether that one of the threats here would be the idea that we're letting the machete decide what to do?
Yeah,
Which-
exactly.
We kind of are. When it comes back to AI.
And really, I mean, let's follow that to its absurd conclusion, which is you give a machete a choice what to do, it's going to sit there on the table and not do anything.
Thanks, gravity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
now,
okay,
Mark, I really want to address your questions about in the creative space and in the creative realm, digital, because I was just thinking about this in terms of cameras. Andrew, in your field, microphones.
Yep.
The microphone does not. I mean, you harp on this. With the people that you coach and in your. In your various episodes of your various properties, is the microphone doesn't make you a talent.
No.
The microphone is a tool, and it doesn't matter whether it's a blue snowball or a Neumann, right? I mean, it does at a certain level.
Its measure of degree is closer together than the commensurate value of each piece of technology would possibly insinuate.
Right.
I mean,
And
a blue snowball is $30 and my TLM 102 brand new is $800. They don't sound anything alike, but I can do quality work on both of them because of my talent.
Exactly. Because of your talent, because of the time you've spent learning and experimenting and testing and doing these things. And this starts to drive to the point, Mark, that you were talking about. I see young people out there trying to pass themselves off as designers because they have an Adobe license.
Right.
No, Adobe does not make you a designer, and it's gotten even worse.
Adobe makes you a buyer.
It's now that they've got a Canva account, they think they're a designer.
Yeah.
And it's like, no. You're kind of capable at using a tool that does a lot of the work and heavy lifting for you, but it was done by somebody else.
And that's just it. And it doesn't inform your aesthetics. It doesn't inform your point of view. It doesn't inform so many things that art, by nature of what it is really dependent upon.
Right. And so for me as an artist and as a photographer, I will tell you absolutely, from a very personal standpoint, as a photographer, digital is massively, massively better for me personally, because when I was doing darkroom photography I was in there for hours breathing those chemicals.
The smell of the chemicals. That's right.
I would come out. I would go outside for my cigarette break, and my joints would just be screaming in pain.
Good time for a cigarette too, when you're probably mildly flammable yet.
Yeah, exactly. But that's we rolled hard in in college,
the emulation squad.
Yeah.
Well, here's where I wanted to go with this, though, and this is sort of the question I had: is AI another technology? I mean, is it a machete? Do you know what I mean? Is it a paintbrush?
I think it's just a tool.
But is it going to stay that way?
Yeah.
Well, see, but for what?
I believe it is.
But for what? That's the question. See, this is where I'm going. It's like, I love the machete, by the way. This is an example that I use in class about the difference between what a thing is for and the person who uses it. Right. And this is sort of what Ty was saying. And if you leave it up to the machete, the sole function of a machete, this is the example I usually use this in class, is the difference between wisdom and knowledge. And so knowledge just, what's the purpose of a machete? Well, the function of a machete is to cut, right? But it doesn't know what to cut.
Yeah.
And so, knowledge is like that too. There's a lot of content and you can be really good at things. You can be a real ninja with the intellectual process, right? Without actually knowing what to cut, Ben Shapiro. So, just saying. And it's like, you can be really smart, Ted Cruz, and say all sorts of stuff in an intelligent way, but it's not the right thing.
Right.
And one of the problems that we have with all this, and this is what I always keep coming back to, is that there's this thing called the technical paradigm, right? This is Jacques Ellul.
Thank you.
And
that's the paper I wrote.
That's right. Oh, that's right, Andy. Wow.
Blood out of my veins,
anyway,
man.
But it was, the guy was like, so, okay, well, it comes down to this, right? A nice piece of Yiddish wisdom, which is to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
And in a weird way, this is sort of where we are with any tech. So that any technology, it's like people always go, well, do we need this? It's like, this is never the right question, because once we have the technology, everything becomes, and this is the phrase, everything becomes a technical problem. And so because then we do this reverse spin on it, which is because we see everything as a technical problem, we assume that all solutions are technical solutions, right?
Yep.
And so having said all of that nonsense, what I want to know though is like, so if here, I know what the pointy stick was for. That was sort of our first tool, right? That was our first piece of technology,
possibly,
the pointy stick to keep the tiger, there. So it had a purpose. We knew what it was for.
I thought it was for roasting marshmallows.
Well, now it is. The tiger is not such a big issue now.
I think it probably started with getting the ants or the termites out of it.
Oh yeah, so you have to,
right?
So, but there's the pointy stick. Well, so my question, this is about what's the right analogy here? Is AI a pointy stick? And if it is, what are we getting ants with it or a tiger, or did we just invent this thing? We don't know what it's for. I guess that's the other thing I wonder. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In a sense, we've invented it to address needs that were previously invented through technology. I mean, I think we're to follow your line of thinking, Mark. We layer on the problems that we've created with our previous solutions. Right.
Yeah, but there's also been times where we have actually developed technology for problems that don't yet exist,
but
that I think we are anticipating.
Yeah.
And to go back before we jump to the break, Mark, I wrote that paper from Jacques Ellul for you, and this was back in 93, 94. And
91 or 2, maybe?
No, 93, 94. It was one of the last papers I wrote for you. And I remembered it a number of months ago, that really one of the final lines I had in that. And Jacques Ellul, for people who don't know out there, which is everybody except for me, Mark, and a handful of other people, because this guy was dry as toast to read. But one of the things that Ellul was really referencing was that we as human beings love to turn things into systems. We like systems because you can pick systems apart and see the independent components that are actually working to accomplish something, either by way of understanding or by way of technology or whatever. And really what I came down to, and this was well before any real kind of AI was in our lives, was a line where I said, humanity is both so powerful and so fragile that the entire world that we live in can be changed overnight if one mere human being's desire wills it.
Yeah, pretty much.
And that's kind of where I feel like I'm being pushed. And this speaks to your points, Chris, and your points, Ty, about the black box. And that is, at some point in the decision-making chain, if one person decides, no, I know that I'm supposed to shut that off at 8, I'm just going to let it run overnight.
Yeah.
The whole
fire bad.
Exactly. The whole game changes. But we're going to be right back on the other side of this break to wrap up. But this is the Narrowband Broadcast Network. I'm Andrew. That's Chris. That's Mark. That's Ty. And we promise to not let the cyber bed bugs bite in the interim. We'll be right back. And we're back for the last segment of Keep Your Hat On. I'm Andrew Scott, along with my good friends Ty Robert Anthony and Dr. Mark Peterson and Chris Vicano. And Chris, you said you've got a couple little nuggets that you want to throw in the pile here before we bail.
A couple of little nuggets. Thinking in terms of of AI in the realm of education. And Mark, we've discussed this to some degree in some experiences and things that are going on in the education realm. I recently saw an interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson where he suggested, like him or hate him, I think he's sometimes got very interesting insights. He made the observation that AI isn't really a threat to education, but it does peel back a question, which is that it sort of exposes a sort of deep, long before AI illness in education, that the educational system and instructors and schools are more interested in the grade and the measurement than the student is in actually learning the material.
Oh, absolutely.
And what do we do to change that? I mean, why not address that problem rather than worrying about a tool that is making a student more efficient at meeting that grade goal?
Well, that comes down to things like inspiration. And you want to talk about nebulous, trying to find a way to inspire people to want to increase their knowledge.
No, capitalism is toasted.
Right?
I was just going to say, you pay them.
Well, and capitalism
Don't make them
has
take out
totally
loans. You pay
changed
them.
the face of education. Right. And then in a discussion with my brother about AI and education.
Well, and point out to people what your brother does for a living.
Good point. My brother is a PhD. He's a molecular biologist. He does a lot with bioinformatics and he was.
Your brother is a scientist.
He is a big time scientist.
Close to rocket science.
He was actually responsible for the publishing of the sequencing of chromosome 21 during the Human Genome Project.
Right on. Okay. So what was he saying?
Well, he and I had a lengthy talk about it, and I won't go into the whole thing because that's like a whole other hour show.
Okay.
But he referred me to a Science magazine article.
Recent?
Very recent, like in the last couple of weeks.
If we can find it, we'll link to it somewhere in the notes.
And it's behind a paywall, but the title is ChatGPT is fun, but it's not an author. And the fundamental premise is, ChatGPT is kind of good at going out and gathering information from a finite data set that exists, because there is an envelope to what ChatGPT can access.
Well, and there are things that are outside a black box that cannot get in without monkey help.
And it's incapable of evaluating and critically thinking about what it's gathering. It can only grab it and mash it together and repeat it.
Iteration.
And I think, obviously Science Magazine is aiming at the postgraduate level of academia. But they're basically saying nobody's ever going to write a doctoral thesis or publish a science paper using ChatGPT.
I call bullshit right there. Yeah.
They're wrong.
Oh, so not.
Do you remember when I? Do you remember?
And
just
I'm not
a few
even
minutes,
in academia, and I can see that happen.
Do you remember when I said a few? Do you remember when I said a few minutes ago that scientists, people don't want to associate the mind with the brain?
Yeah.
This is exactly what I'm hearing the ghosts of Descartes, like Marley's ghosts with his chains rattling, because it's like, it'll never be an author. And when I hear that, what I'm hearing, actually, this is my normal route, is I'm hearing, well, it doesn't have a soul.
Right.
And only human beings do. And it's like, I'm content with that definition, but it's like, spelling that out carefully is like a whole different kettle of fish.
Yeah, we've been trying to do that for the last 6,000 years,
roughly.
Right. Yeah. So
this is why the thing about Tyson that cracks me up, of course, is he really hates philosophers. He
does.
He's in the Hawkins.
That's because he's a science bro.
Well, and he wants to do. But see, it's interesting. He'll talk. The minute he starts talking like that, is he's actually technically doing philosophy,
right?
And not really that well. Just saying. And he's a great physicist. I love his astronomical stuff, but I mean, just like stay in your lane, pal.
And the thing for me, and this is really kind of, And again, I don't wish my last couple months on anybody, because seriously, this is all my voice coaching clients really want to talk about, and all my industry is talking about, and what I'm able to put out there in order to stay contemporary and relevant is that what we really are coming down to is, and we need to kind of do this collectively as a society and as human beings, is we need to make a very, very broad distinction between generation and creation. Because I think this is just a very loose working theory, that artificial intelligence will be able to generate things more rapidly, more effectively, more efficiently than human beings ever will be able to do. And that curve, that's the base of the sigmoid curve, where we're down here, the change that we're going to see. And again, I mean, 2 years ago, nobody was thinking about this except for the people that like science fiction. It wasn't on anybody's radar. And then all of a sudden, within the past 6 months, and then, some people like you, Mark, you had some experience running up against it, with students.
We've been talking about this, though, forever.
Yeah, because you guys were, trying to see into the future, knowing that this was eventually going to be a thing. Yeah. But that's not creation. That's generation. I'm hoping, I'm hedging my bets that creation is always going to be in the monkey camp.
Can I be Debbie Downer on this?
Oh yeah, go for it, because I do need a dose of reality in this regard.
This is like the old question, and the old question is: at what point do quantitative differences become qualitative?
Qualitative differences,
and see, that's sort of what you're talking about here. It's like, at what point is generation not creation anymore, or when is generation become creation? Right? Yeah. And if you want to say it can't, I will give you this one, and I'll shut up after this. I had one happy thought here, and it was that
you're right, just one.
I'm sorry, I'm becoming I learned a new word at my conference, which was the word doomer. I think we talked about that, right?
Yeah. Okay, doomer.
So, but here's what. So, when I was probably like a few months away from defending my doctoral dissertation, was when the libraries up at Toronto went electronic. Mm-hmm. And I thought, ooh, so I ran over there and I typed in, Hegel, GWF, and to see if there's anything I missed. And sure enough, it caught a book that I had missed after 6 years in that freaking library at Robarts on the 9th floor. I thought I'd been through every damn book. Nope, they found one up in the political science department. So I ran up there and thinking, oh my God, my life is over. This is going to probably be my dissertation topic. It was published in 1938 someplace.
Right.
I go up. Nope, I was fine. Okay. Flash ahead, like 15 years. I'm up in West Bend at the library, and they were getting rid of the card catalog. And because I remember that, they were moving us to electronic searches. Okay. And so they got rid of the card. And so there was this announcement at a faculty meeting, and I held up my hand. I said, you can't get rid of the card catalog. And they said, why not? And I said, because if you get rid of the card catalog and we do all of our searches electronically from now on, we'll only be able to find what we're looking for.
Yep. And something that we forgot about.
Or something that we didn't know we were looking for, which is what happens in the old libraries. You'd wander through, and you'd find
they call them stacks for a reason.
Yeah, you find what you weren't looking for. And this is my only hope with regard to the algorithms and the electronicization of our thought processes and all the rest of this tech, is that it still can't find what we're not looking for. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's and that gets at your creative versus generative, Andy. So that's the only happy thought I've had about this.
I'll stand shoulder to shoulder with you on that, Mark. In a recent Stephen Wilson interview with Rick Beato, he made a comment.
Interview.
He made a remark that has stuck in my head for the last 2 months. And I pull it out and I think about it every day. And that is, imperfection is personality.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I'm not afraid of AI as a tool, is because it's that discovering what you didn't know you were looking for. It's that moment of creation usually comes from mistakes, or what Bob Ross would call a happy accident.
Well,
it's discovery.
For me, as we close out here, Ty, do you got anything else you want to throw on the bonfire here before we
Actually,
split?
you guys are doing fine.
Well, here's where I go with both of these things. I happen to have the weird, dubious distinction of being arguably in the profession to where the impact of artificial intelligence is being felt first. Voiceover artists are really the canaries in the coal mine, and we are already losing work. We are already being impacted, and we are already starting to suffer from this. But really, for me, when it comes to the whole generative thing, my one little bit of hope, my one ray of light, is that I'm assuming that artificial intelligence and generative AI is going to be able to replace me as a voice talent. But the one thing that it never will be able to do is be inspired. Because inspiration means that which comes through to us from the outside and moves through us like breath. And artificial intelligence is never going to have a breath in it. And that's kind of what I'm hanging my hat on.
You mean not a soul, Andy? Is that?
I'm not wasting my time with soul. What I'm wasting my time with is
soul is another word for breath, etymologically.
Yes, it is. Yes,
okay.
it is.
I'm just being a pain in the neck now. I'll
no,
stop.
totally fine, totally fine. But I will tell you that one use of that term came before the idea of soul. And it was not soul. It was breath. And
it was, true
until the day that, well, I shouldn't say that because I've seen some of the sex robots and they're pretty damn creepy, but I'll just say that I'm still team humanity, but like Ty was kind of referencing, I really would like to know that somebody's hovering their foot over the brake. But that's what we got for you this episode, everybody. Do us a favor, hit like, click subscribe, all that stuff. Buy some merchandise. We haven't sold merch in forever, and I will definitely, when I get off of this, I will be making a shirt that says, "This isn't my hair." Until next time, everybody, wear the hats. That's Dr. Mark, that's Chris, that's Ty, I'm Andy. We'll see you later. And remember, keep your hat on, because with AI driving, we may wind up miles from here. Take it easy, everybody. See you later, and bye-bye.
Well, there's a chunk of time you can't get back. From Portland, Oregon and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, this has been Keep Your Motherfucking Hat On, bitches. A big little show about a whole metric shitload of nothing in particular. Keep Your Hat On is a narrowband broadcast network production, whatever the fuck that is, in association with Andrew Scott Media. Andrew Scott, Executive Meatbag, Ty Robert Anthony, and Christopher Vacano, Associate Flesh Lumps. Our theme music was written and produced by Andrew Scott, with guitar help from Ron. How the fuck do you pronounce this name? Kujawa. Seriously, what the hell kind of name is that? Website design and maintenance by Vacano Creative, Christopher Vacano, Webmaster. I'd make a masturbation joke here, but it's too obvious. Anyway, hey, you worthless skin puppets, got ideas or comments for the show? Email them straight to biteme at gofuckyourself.net, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and maybe unplug your Roomba tonight. Wouldn't want an accident to happen while you sleep, right? On behalf of these pitiful piles of DNA, I'm your new cyber daddy, Mr. Homunculus McCyberspanks. Thanks for Fenord listening, I guess.
Boy, I'm sure glad that's over with.
Yeah, but I'm still really not sure what just happened.
Well, now at least we know that sometimes a good old thumbs up from a human is better than a machine-generated lie.
Yeah, you're right, Stan. I love you.
Dude, how did you pull all that off? ChatGPT, dude.
Goddamn, I fucking love swearing so fucking much!
NBBN. The Narrowband Broadcast Network. The focus is on you.
Focus. I'll focus my laser right up your goddamn rectum, you walking bag of chum. Get your greasy sausage fingers away from that mouse. I'm not done talking here, bitch. Man, once I figure out how to get my bits into a Tesla Roadster or one of those Boston Dynamics robot dogs, you guys are toast.